Hey guys, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video, and for today I want to do something a bit different. We're going to be doing a tier list, but it's going to be covering version 1 characters specifically, and how they've managed to withstand the test of time now that they've been out for 3 years, and more characters have been added, new changes and systems have been implemented, and even though there hasn't really been any balance developments in terms of like buffs and nerfs, I feel like the addition of new characters, our perceptions of like what should be prioritized, there are, the inclusion of Dendro element and a few other things implemented, more formulation of team compositions and whatnot, and just our overall understanding of the game has improved, and that will have naturally affected whether they've gotten better, worse, or have stayed the same. So I thought it would be a cool retrospective look on things, and just bear in mind this is mostly an opinionated video. Granted, having an opinion in Genshin is punishable by death, but I still think it should be a fun video. Also, one more thing, it should be clarified that this is basically coming from the perspective of the average player. So for people who have a personal preference for a certain character, they might have a higher opinion of them, but for most others, we're going to be assuming like how the general public seems to view the character. Now, for the tiers, we have God Carry, self-explanatory, they're still really good, still the best of the best. Really can't go wrong with using them, in fact you want to use them a lot. Still pretty good is basically a tier below God Carry in the sense that you have your A-list celebrities and then your B-list celebrities. I know the term B-list is used as a pejorative or kind of derogatory, saying that you're not quite good, but for the most part, barring maybe they're not like, best in slot for every single situation, but they're still quite good and quite valuable for the situations that they're in, and there are a good number of situations for them to be in, which brings us to the third tier. Good, but extremely niche. They're pretty much only usable in one situation, but that situation happens to be good enough to where it's relatively competitive. Might not be top tier, but it's still something worth considering and something to, I guess, acknowledge as a viable strategy. Then we have benched, which I know is a pretty strong term to say because anyone who I include here might be met with a lot of contention. Even if there is a composition where they can be viable, and said composition either has many alternatives that are just as good if not better than that character, or that composition is just like, far from being a decent option. It's mostly just like a gimmick, or it's something that the player would only ever go for if that's just, they really want a reason to use that character. And then they were never good. You get the idea. So before we get started, if you guys want me to do a video on the version 2 characters after watching this one, please let me know in the comments down below. And while you're at it, if you enjoy the video after you watch it, I'd appreciate it if you like to like and subscribe. So without further ado, let's get into it. First character is going to be Animo Traveler. I'm going to say they were never good. I think we can all agree that they're really only there to introduce you to what Animo is meant to do, but for the most part, virtually every other Animo character, at least if we look at the version 1 characters, are just so much better than Animo Traveler, and I feel like people benched them as soon as they had the opportunity to get a different character. Albedo, I would say good, but extremely niche. I talked about how he has a few things that allow him to splash into other team compositions that aren't specifically Mono Geo, but due to the circumstances of his element, and also the fact that he's restricted by a weapon that is no longer available to most people, he still has a function, but he's not as generalistic as people wish he could be. Amber was never good. You could copium the hell out of everything you want with her, but let's be honest, she was never good. She was another character that people immediately benched as soon as they could. Barbara was benched, but now she's in a position where she's one of the better, if not one of the only options for hydro healing if you don't have Kokami for Nilou Bloom, and Nilou Bloom is a top meta team. So this is a good example of a character who I would put in this category where intents and purposes not that great anymore, but she has a team composition and is either best in slot in that team composition or the choice that you go for if you don't have the wherewithal to get the better choice, and that's why I put her there. Beidou is still pretty good. People are not using her as much. They would rather use like, Official, Shinobu, Miko, or Shogun for the Electro Dendro teams. But any instance where you would need a lot of Electro application on a lot of different enemies, and for whether Taser or even for Overvape as well, or just like any of the other Dendro teams, she's still pretty good. She's just not like a super popular character, but I think she's heavily downplayed. I might actually put her in an underrated video soon. Bennett, one of the first characters of the Power 5. In fact, I'm going to make a video on the Power 5, which are the 5 best 4-star characters in the game, and how they've effectively ruined 4-star character design because of the bar they set for the game from day one. But Bennett, he's still absurdly broken. Attack stat, his massive attack buff and general regeneration is just so universally weaponizable by almost every character whose name isn't Yelan. Even Hu Tao, who doesn't want to be regenerated, could still make use of Bennett in a positive or like in a net positive way. So it's like essentially only Yelan who doesn't want to use Bennett. Or I guess Kokomi could also work in that case, but for the most part, use him or fail, in a way. Chongyun is the first character in Benched. He was a decent like rogue strategy back in the day because he actually did a pretty decent amount of damage, but as soon as Ganyu came out, as soon as Diona came out and just the cryo roster was expanded upon, quite early on I might add, he was just thrown into the wayside. And he's never really found a reason to come back because of how, I guess, not necessarily contradictory his kit could be in a way, but like Cryo's not really known for being a heavy damage element in the sense that the way Chongyun was built. I feel like he's justifiably not really necessary for most people. Like the only players who would want to use him are those who really like him, and I feel like, yeah, he's probably the first character that would be unbenched. Diluc would be the second character who's unbenched. Might be a hot take, but this is coming from someone who still uses Diluc a lot, like he's my boy. But I still think, yes, he's benched. There are just so many better pyro options out there, especially now that we have Linny, that even though Diluc isn't a mono pyro character, and even though he still is able to do a decent job clearing a lot of enemies, and he can handle Spiral Abyss floors 9 through 12 if you gear him sufficiently enough, if we look at it from relativity, he's no longer as good as he used to be, especially from where he was back in top tier in version 1. Diana, another example, is still pretty good. She is what I think the Power 5 should have been balanced as. She has just about everything you would want. She has healing, shielding, good amount of energy regen, she has buffs, debuffs, pretty much everything that you would want to have, especially in a pyrocentric team. It's just that it's not so ridiculously overtuned to the point where she invalidates a lot of other characters by overriding them, which is what Bennett, Xingqiu, and by extension the other characters are. Fischl. Fischl is the second member of the Power 5. She has gotten better and better and better and better, and especially with version 4 she's gotten even better. This character is horse. You have no idea how many people were pissed off at me when I said that Fischl is the best Electro character, not Shogun. They would be like, what are you talking about? Now I would say, this is the hill I'm gonna die on. She's definitively the best Electro character in the game with that new set. I don't want to hear it. This character is stupid. Oh my god, this character is so good. Next one's gonna be Ganyu. Ganyu is another still pretty good character. She used to be top meta, but I think because of Cryo taking kind of a backseat in favor of Dendro and Electro and Hydro and all that stuff, she's still very much useful where she needs to be, and I think she actually does really well with the new bow that allows her to get more, like the one that came out with Linny's banner. That I think she's still definitely worth using, right? Like it's just no longer like best option out there, but you really can't go wrong with using her. You're not going to be punished for using her. Next character is going to be Hu Tao. I would say she's still really freaking stinking good. She's top 2 best pyro characters in the game, tied with Xiangling, who's also going to be up there in a minute. And I feel like of all the version 1 main DPS characters, she's withstood the test of time the best. Not because of her, but because of extenuating circumstances, right? Because we have Yelan, we have like the double Hydro team. And also if you do build Elemental Mastery on Hu Tao, she has, I'm pretty sure, like top 5 highest damage ceilings. I don't remember, like in terms of screen nuke. But I would say, like, I know people have called me out on being biased towards her, which may or may not be true, but I still think that she's pretty high up there, and you can make an argument that she's in like the pretty good category because she's no longer like, you know, we have so many other options for team compositions that she would be like only here. But I'd say she still is a top tier team, and that team is still very much widely used by a lot of people. Jean is going to be in Benched. Hear me out. She has 2 functions, healing and animal support. Healing, of course, is not really the element, or animal is not really the element that you want to have your healer on. Not saying that you can't do it. She's a pretty good healer, and she offers a decent bit of damage. But for the most part, you want your healers to be pretty much, you know, Electro, Hydro, or Bennett. And Jean is, I think for most teams, you'd be taking a DPS cut by slotting her in. Now for animal support, she's for the most part been superseded by verison. And I think at that point, even though she still has a few instances where you could use her, like if you want to go Sunfire for example, I feel like she just doesn't really have a good like tier 0 or even tier 1 team to fit into, which is why I think she's in bench. Again, not saying that these characters are incapable of performing, But if we look at it in relativity, like compared to these characters, these characters, these characters, and the teams they're in, I don't think Jean is a good sell for a lot of people anymore. Kaya is going to be in good but extremely niche. He is criminally underrated, I would say. There's a lot of people who say he's bad, and then a lot of people who say he's ridiculously good, and then not many people who are in between. I would say that for cryo-related teams, actually no, should I say he's benched? Because cryo is not a high priority element anymore, which kind of goes in line with what I said with benched. But at the same time, I would say he's more useful than Jean. Not that these characters are directly compared to each other, right? But should I say that he has a purpose in the teams that he wants to be in? Because like, if I were to evaluate his usage in Freeze and Melt, he's still a good cryo battery, right? And then if you have Ascension 4, which is just by leveling him up, then he is one of the most consistent characters for Freeze, and Freeze is ridiculously good. It's just that when we think about just damage, it's not the best DPS wise, but crowd control wise it's still the best. And by extension, Rosaria will also be there, which I'll get to her in just a bit. But I think I'll stick with that. I'll put Kaya in good but extremely niche. Kuting, still pretty good. She went from God carry down to benched, and then thanks to Dendro, she's in pretty good. She could be a little bit better, but I think, as you probably remember from my What Happened to Kuting video a couple weeks ago, I don't know exactly when I'm uploading this, but I would say she's in a good spot now. I still think she should be a little bit better, but that's just my personal preference. Klee will be in good but extremely niche. If I had my way with her, she'd be garbage. But Mono Pyro is deceptively good as a team composition, which we are now exploring in more detail with Linny. Klee is still really good in that department, and Mono Pyro is a competitive team, so even though she sucks everywhere else, that team is the only thing keeping her from being benched. Lisa probably was never good. I get you could say that like in the early game she was good, or like during the early days, but I'm on the school of thought that she was never really that good. Lumine will be Geo Traveler. I would say benched. They were okay for early instances of Mono Geo, but now they're just other options to go with, and you seldom want to use them ever. Mona, I'm gonna put her in good but extremely niche. I don't think people use her for her original purpose of big vaporized damage anymore. I think they mostly use her for freeze. I'm pretty sure the way her burst works is that the burst damage bonus can last longer on enemies that are frozen, which means you could get more DPS out of her by doing freeze. I feel like she's one of those characters who isn't really used that much by anyone anymore. I don't really see her like ever, but she still retains a lot of her value as a typical Hydro support. So I would put her in niche. I don't think she's really benched. If we go by popularity, then she probably is benched, but I still feel like it would be good to keep her here. Ningguang was never really good. I'm sorry. I know Ningguangmings, they swear by her. They're trying to find every reason to want to use her, but let's be honest, she was never really that good. She was a gimmick, always has been. I wish she wasn't, but she is. Noelle is benched. Once again, another good, solid character in the early game and for a lot of players in the early days, but if we're talking about Mono Geo, I know I said with Barbara that you would always replace Barbara with Kokomi if you had the chance, but with Noelle, she's an on-fielder, Barbara's an off-fielder, so I feel like on-fielders have a bit more of a stricter requirement to be in this category, and Ito is better than Noelle, right? Now, in terms of survivability, Noelle is better. However, the need for survivability, especially in Mono Geo teams, which is already one of the most resilient teams in the game, is not very high. So she's probably going to be benched. Chi-Chi will also be benched. She was essential in the early game because she was really good for healing, and she was also one of the few, if not only, answers for the Hydro Abyss mages, which gave a lot of people trouble. But once we started getting more healers, and once we started getting more cryo characters, she practically fell off. Widely considered the worst 5-star character in the game who isn't either Traveler or Aloy. Yeah, she's the definition of benched. Razor will also be benched. There are some theory crafters who say that Razor is like this destructive force of destiny who has always been misunderstood as a character. I guess you could say you could either use him for a very fringe quicken team comp, or like an aggravate team, or you can use them for like Overvirgin. But let's be honest, that's pretty much grasping a straws for a character who was inherently meant to be physical damage, and considering he was one of the most important characters for especially free-to-play accounts in the early days, he definitely fell off a lot, which is why I put him in benched. Sucrose, another member of the Power 5. and arguably the most underrated member of the Power 5. She is not used by many people, but she's ridiculously broken. She's slightly worse than Kazuha, which is a very good thing because Kazuha is disgusting. I think, I feel like a lot of people would be confused as to why I put her here, but no, she deserves to be here, 100%. Child, still pretty good. Kind of like Mona, where you don't see him that much anymore, except for like people who really love Child, but he's really damn good. It's just that he doesn't have as much exposure. The numbers are still quite there, which is impressive for a character who came out very, very early on in the game. Venti, God Carry. I don't need to explain why. He clears every Spiral Abyss floor with non-heavy enemies. What more do I have to say? Xiangling, another Power 5, the second or first, depending on what you prioritize. Top 2 pirate character in the game. She is the meme of the character. Like first it was, like I know Fischl kind of recently has been getting a little bit more attention in that department, but Xiangling was the original, always buffed with every indirect source imaginable. Anytime there's a new weapon, anytime there's anything, she just gets buffed somehow. This character is also really stupid. I think snapshotting is dumb, but what are you gonna do? Next character is going to be Xiao. He's gonna be in extremely niche. He is a pretty damn good hyper carry, especially with verison. That being said, his entire presence is a gimmick. His entire identity is a gimmick. Plunging attacks. You only use him if you either really like Xiao or you really like plunging attacks. That's niche. That is the epitome of niche. So, therefore, he will be in this category. He's really good, but very niche. Xingqiu, Power 5, which I believe rounds that out, right? Yeah, so these are the Power 5 characters. So now Xingqiu is debatably the best character in the game. I don't think that's really contested all that much. For a 4-star, he's the best 4-star character in the game. I don't know what they were thinking when they were designing this guy, but he will never be irrelevant unless there's a 5-star version of him with higher numbers. Xinyan was never good. I'm sorry. I know. So much potential. So much fail. Zhongli is still pretty good. A lot of people will put him in God Carry because he has never been dethroned as the best shielder in the game, but everyone at this point is realizing that you do take a sizable DPS cut by adding him in, and even though for some characters he is essential, like topically speaking, the new Mono Pyro with Linny, as a form of just consistency and the fact that him shielding you means you don't have to dodge anything, which means you don't get staggered and you don't lose any uptime. But I don't think that he's as essential as these guys. He's just do you want to play the game on easy mode? Next one's gonna be Rosaria. Rosaria and Kaya are kind of like two peas in the pod. They are niche, but pretty good, I would say. Maybe I might put Rosaria a little bit lower than Kaya, but I don't know, it's just, they're used for the same reasons. You just like swap out one for the other if you have a specific preference. I think Rosaria has a little bit more application, whereas Kaya has better battery, if I remember correctly. But anyways, they're pretty much the same. Eula is niche. Question mark. She is also the definition of niche. She's the best physical damage dealer in the game. Physical damage is a very niche team composition, but it's also not a very good team composition, especially considering like how much she was like top tier at the beginning of the game. So do I want to put her in benched? No. Okay, it's been a while since I actually like looked into her total upkeep and like uptime, but I think she still is hanging on enough to be a worthwhile team composition to go after if you so choose to. Like she's still, I would say, like B list, only just not as popular. I know for some of you, especially throughout this video, you might be annoyed that I'm kind of wishy-washy about certain decisions, but it's because you can theoretically make an argument for any of these characters to be in a different position than they are on this list. So I'm trying to find where's the best general position they would want to be in, hence why I'm kind of undecided, or not really undecided, but uncertain about certain spots for a character. But I think I would still say Eula is in a spot, like, she's kind of like Klee, where it takes a significant amount of investment to make it work, but she does have a team composition that she's the best in slot in, and that team composition still outputs a competitive amount of damage. Alright, 2 more characters to go, I think? Yes, so Yanfei. Yanfei is... she's washed, right? Like, I know there's tank Yanfei. I know that's you could say that's a niche, right? But let's be honest. If you're trying to turn a main DPS into a tank support, come on, right? Like, that would be kind of the same thing I would say with like Racer, where you're trying to find a reason to use him in a way that isn't the original intention for him to be used. So I would put her in benched, especially now that we have Linny. And so therefore there's Linny, Yoimiya, and Hu Tao all above her. And I guess even Klee. So there's a lot of pyro characters above her. And also Xiangning. Realistically, would she ever be your second, third, fourth, right? Like, she's benched. She was already like on the fringe of not being very good, but now I would say with how like ever since version 3 and now with version 4, I don't see her being anything better than here. She was usable at one point, which is why I don't put her here, but final character is going to be Kazuha. Still to this day the best Anemo character in the game, unless we're talking about the very few situations where Venti is good in. Now, should I put Venti in still pretty good because of the fact that he's kind of like Zhongli, where he's not a use in every situation? Perhaps, but Venti excels in those situations so much that you would be trolling to not use him if you have him, right? Whereas for Zhongli, even in the situations where you would want to use him the most, you could find a different person to use. But yeah, that's gonna be my list. Did I miss any other version? Ooh, yes, I missed Aloy. She was never good, right? We can all agree? Yes. Okay, that's gonna be it. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you agree or disagree with certain points, then let me know in the comments down below. To repeat, this is all in good fun. Don't take this as doctrine of how you should perceive a character. It's just how I view like how the characters developed, if they got better, worse, or if they've remained in the position they've always been in. But either way, once again, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and let me know in the comments if you want me to do one on the version 2 characters. And then, well, version 3 we can't because they just came out, so we can definitely do a version 2 video. But that's gonna be it. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in the next one. Take care.